I never really understood, other than material facility, why I did animals or things that sort of looked like animals, or simple rectangular figures, or cloud heads, or whatever you want to call them, until I had our first child. We had our first child, and we bought him a Richard Scarry book. And I remember having the greatest storybook ever when I was a kid, and constantly looking through it and reading it, and that being a reference to my childhood and stuff. And although the work isn't a reference to my childhood, when I think about the relationship of all of the animals, who are all human and all doing what everyday people do, when I think about that, that might very well be where it came from. I never really thought about it until I re-looked at those books. Mostly they just come out of the material, how I use the material, how the material sort of ends up making things look like things. I started by finding objects that looked like things, and then I started manipulating materials a little bit more, and I realized that it was easier for me to make animals than to make people, or they were a little more disarming to have an animal on the page that was saying something, so that you would react to it different than if you saw a person saying it, because then you have a whole bunch of baggage that separates you somehow, I think. The text generally comes out of, like, there's no real pre-planned text. Occasionally I'll edit things, I'll write them down if I want to see how it feels to see these two characters saying something, but generally I'll just write something down and then put it on, or if it's a drawing, write it directly on the drawing. The story changes pretty much all the time. There's no running narrative between the characters, although, as in any kind of life, there will be overlap, and there will be narrative that runs through, or parallel narratives. So that's the best way I can describe of where the text and the stories come from. I mean, when I first started writing text, it was usually stuff that came out of songs, things that I thought I heard in songs, but then as it progressed, I would, possibly hear somebody say something to somebody else, or have somebody say something to me, or hear a story from my parents and not directly write it down, but sort of let it process somehow and then come out in the end. And occasionally you get one that's like directly from somebody told me, and that happens occasionally. So, but generally it's just make it up on the spot if it seems right. Imagine these two or three characters, or however many, in a situation, and then they are interacting somehow.